in the evening of April 25th, 1945, Harry S. Truman took the momentous oath of office as President of the United States. With the world at war, he accepted the gravest responsibility in world history, a new commander-in-chief to lead our nation to ultimate victory. Harry Truman came of sturdy stock. Born in Missouri of pioneer parents, the man who took over the fearsome task of resolving chaos began life with becoming humility. Harry Truman never lost touch with the people of Main Street. His home is in Independence, Missouri, in a comfortable house he earned by hard work. It shelters a family closely knit by affection, common heritage, and aims. Here, daughter Margaret grew to gracious womanhood, encouraged in her talents by understanding parents. Harry Truman is husband and father, first and foremost. It is neighbor Truman who is best known in Independence. High office has not changed his everyday relations with the home folks of all races, creeds, and colors. His warm understanding for just people makes him conscious of the plain citizen's needs. When at home, he always visits his early business associate, Ed Jacobson. The little town of Grandview was always a magnet for the president as long as his mother lived in her modest cottage. Much of the president's character stems from the indomitable will that sustained her into her 90s and from his abiding affection for her. Harry Truman's career of wartime service to his nation began in the First World War as an artillery captain overseas. World War II found him heading the vitally important Truman Committee of the United States Senate, watchdog of national defense expenditures. His record of achievement in government brought him the Democratic nomination as Vice President in 1944, running mate for Franklin D. Roosevelt. When his chief died, Harry Truman fell heir to the national and international policies that Franklin Roosevelt had created. Never did an incoming executive confront a more serious situation. His character as a leader and his desire to serve his nation was graphically expressed in his opening message to Congress.
Even the most experienced pilot cannot bring a ship safely into harbor unless he has the full cooperation of the crew. For the benefit of all, every individual must do his duty.
Following in the footsteps of the late Franklin D. Roosevelt, President Truman fostered the United Nations as an instrument for world peace. He became the chief spokesman for global freedom. He fought earnestly in the cause of humanity, as his opening address from the White House to the United Nations revealed.
You members of this conference are to be the architects of a better world. In your hands rests our future. By your labors at this conference, we shall know if suffering humanity is to achieve a just and lasting peace.
In spite of world affairs, Harry Truman, returning from the Pan American Conference in Rio, found time to relax with the crew aboard the Big Mo before resuming the cares of state in Washington. No one is happier with just folks than Mr. Truman, whose humble country background endowed him with a deep spiritual integrity. From his earliest National Guard days, President Truman always maintained the closest kinship with his buddies. And when members of Battery D march, even a president walks. Battery members recall vividly that Captain Truman never asked a man to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He has been close to veterans, to their social activities, and particularly to their problems. None of these has he attacked with more determination than the care of disabled men and the efficient functioning of the Veterans Administration. A lifelong good neighbor, the president's friends include President Lamar of Mexico. The first to recognize the provisional government of Israel, he received from President Chaim Weizmann the sacred Torah, presented on behalf of a grateful new nation. No president in American history has ever been faced with the tremendous foreign problems that confront Harry Truman. With Secretary Marshall, he has met the issues with firmness and patience. Two soldiers address themselves to the cause of peace. As the red tide rolled over Europe, the Truman answer was immediate. The Truman Doctrine, followed by the Marshall Plan. On this record of achievement, at home and abroad, Harry Truman stood for the presidency of the United States.
President Truman addresses the young Democrats in Washington and gets off to a flying start in the 1948 campaign.
It's a very great pleasure for me to be here this evening. And it's a double pleasure to look down on so many smiling, shining faces and to see so much enthusiasm among the Democrats. I want to say to you that for the next 4 years, there'll be a Democrat in the White House and you're looking at him.
Philadelphia's convention hall is jammed as the 30th National Democratic Convention approaches its climactic moments. Already pent-up excitement is bursting forth as, with the preliminaries over, temporary Chairman Barkley gives way to permanent Chairman Sam Rayburn of Texas. Even as Rayburn tries for order, the convention's most crucial battle is being fought in the platform committee off the convention floor. The committee overwhelmingly rejects an amendment strongly supporting the president's civil rights program. But when the committee chairman, Senator Myers of Pennsylvania, presents the platform to the convention, Northern Democrats force this amendment to the floor. In a stunning upset vote, the delegates approve the North's plank. The South's reply to this staggering blow, unprecedented in recent Democratic history, is an equally unprecedented move. The long-threatened walkout is led by Handy Ellis, Alabama chairman.
And we bid you goodbye.
Half of Alabama's 26-man Democratic delegation strides angrily from the convention hall, followed by the entire Mississippi delegation. But even as the bolting delegates call goodbye, Harry Truman is preparing to leave Washington aboard a special train for Philadelphia to accept the nomination, which now seems surely his. But the southern states cling stubbornly to their cause inside Convention Hall. With the battle cry, "You shall not crucify the South on this cross of civil rights," Charles Block of Macon, Georgia, nominates for the presidency of the United States Senator Richard Russell of Georgia, and a big Dixie demonstration gets underway. The demonstration lasts half an hour before Missouri's Governor Phil Donnelly can nominate his candidate.
President of the United States, Harry S. Truman.
The demonstrations last until midnight. Then come the final exciting moments as the clerk calls the roll of states.
Votes for Harry S. Truman.
83 votes for President Harry S. Truman of Missouri and 15 votes for James
The
A.
South
Rose
is almost
of New
solid
York.
for Russell, but North Carolina's split vote clinches the Truman victory.
And 13 votes for President Truman.
Harry S. Truman, having received the majority of all the votes cast, I therefore declare him the Democratic nominee for President of the United States.
President Truman's score is 947.5 votes to Senator Russell's 263. The votes of 23 voting delegates remain uncast. Now the delegates name their vice presidential candidate by acclamation, and Chairman Rayburn announces...
Declares Alvin W. Buckley of Kentucky the Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States.
As Mr. Truman enters, the battle lines for the November election are drawn. The Democratic Party has committed itself and its candidates. President Truman takes up the challenge in a fighting acceptance speech.
I accept the nomination. Senator Barkley and I will win this election and make these Republicans like it. Don't you forget that. My duty as president requires that I use every means within my power to get the laws the people need on matters of such importance and urgency. I am therefore calling this Congress back into session on the 26th of July. I must have your help. You must get in and push and win this election. The country can't afford another Republican Congress.
The Democratic Party names its candidates. Alvin Barkley, Senator from Kentucky, and Harry Truman, President of the United States.
The open season on voters gets underway as the presidential candidates start cross-country vote hunting tours. Candidate Truman, accompanied by his daughter Margaret, gets a send-off from running mate Barkley. A 16-day coast-to-coast tour lies ahead as the Truman Special pulls out of Washington. The president sets himself a stiff pace with 13 speeches on his first day, climaxed at Dexter, Iowa. 80,000 farmers here for the National Plowing Contest. Here Mr. Truman again attacked the Republican 80th Congress and called for a big vote in November.
Get every vote out on Election Day and make it count. You can't afford to waste your votes this year. I'm not asking you just to vote for me. Vote for yourselves. Vote for your farms. Vote for the standard of living that you won under a Democratic administration. Get out there on Election Day and vote for your future.
In Cadillac Square in Detroit, 125,000 hear President Truman open his campaign for re-election with an appeal to organized labor.
If the congressional elements that made the Taft-Hartley law are allowed to remain in power, and if these elements are further encouraged by the election of a Republican president, you men of labor can expect to be hit by a steady barrage of body blows. And if you stay at home, as you did in 1946, and keep these reactionaries in power, you'll deserve every blow you get.
Candidate Harry S. Truman draws other cheering crowds as he appears in Denver on his cross-country tour. 20,000 before the state capitol hear him charge a Republican undercover plan to sabotage the West. In this key city, Mr. Truman makes 4 speeches in one day. Still westward to Salt Lake City hurries the president. Then he dashes to San Francisco. Here in 2 more major addresses, he blasts away at the 80th Congress. Truman and Dewey battle it out for the votes of the nation. Harry S. Truman arrives in Los Angeles to make a fighting bid for California's 25 electoral votes. Big crowds cheer the Democratic candidate, who claimed American liberals would be playing into Republican hands if they voted for the third party. That night, the president appears at a colorful rally in Gilmore Stadium. 16,000 hear him deliver a major campaign speech.
In our system, the people have a right to know exactly what our 2 major parties stand for on specific issues. They have a right to know who is for them and who is against them. The decisive battle has arrived. The people are going to have to choose one side or the other. The Democratic Party and I have nothing to conceal. We are proud of our record.
Candidate Truman gets Tom Dewey's goat in Uvalde, Texas, where he stops to breakfast with its leading citizen, Jack Garner. Half the city's 9,000 residents turn up for the meeting of the two former vice presidents. Mr. Truman, undertaking the most extensive Texas tour ever made by a presidential candidate, repeats to 15,000 at Fort Worth his attacks on the Republican Congress. Campaigning seems to agree with him, for he adds 4 days to his tour. A 9,000-mile trip behind him, President Truman winds up his first campaign swing with a speech at Charleston, West Virginia, and returns to Washington. In 140 talks before an estimated 2 million listeners across the nation, Mr. Truman hammered away again and again at the record of the Republican-controlled 80th Congress. President Truman swings through Camden, New Jersey, and Philadelphia on the third of what he calls his crusades for Democratic victory. Culmination of his strenuous day of campaigning comes at the site of his nomination this summer, Philadelphia's huge convention hall. 12,000 hear him summarize the election issues as high prices, the Taft-Hartley Act, and what he terms the unholy alliance between the Republicans and big business.
Candidate Truman invades candidate Dewey's backyard as his campaign special pulls into Albany. Mr. Truman calls this Democratic weather, and the Democrats turn out in strength. It's only 8 a.m., and the stop is brief. The president's schedule today calls for 14 rear platform talks throughout upstate New York, in Little Falls, in Syracuse. At every stop, he hammers away at the record of the 80th Congress, accusing Republican leaders of using a meat axe on forward-looking legislation and of ignoring the issues of the campaign.
In Scranton, President Truman lays a wreath on the statue of John Mitchell, founder of the United Mine Workers, during an all-day tour of Pennsylvania's coal region, bailiwick of present mine chieftain John Lewis, who opposes his re-election. In Wilkes-Barre and Johnstown, and later in Pittsburgh, Mr. Truman continues his attacks on the 80th Congress as he carries his campaign right down to the wire. The campaign is ending. Candidate Truman, apparently the only American unwilling to concede the defeat unanimously predicted for him, winds up his grueling campaign in New York. A Dewey victory is in the air, and the Republican campaign windup, also in New York, seems more like a victory rally than an election drive. The Democrats are conceded an outside chance only in the Senate, where Republican candidates, like Minnesota's incumbent Joseph Ball, are being forced into strenuous last-minute stumping by underdog Democratic rivals like the 37-year-old mayor of Minneapolis, Hubert Humphrey Jr. Warner Pathe cameras exclusively record the Senate races in the key states. The Tennessee campaign of former GOP committee head Carol Reese is enlivened by Roy Acuff's Smoky Mountain Boys. Opposing Reese is Estes Kefauver, unknown until he was nominated, despite Memphis boss Crump's opposition. No voters are neglected. Republican Patrick Hurley uses an interpreter to appeal to the Spanish-speaking citizens of New Mexico. The former Secretary of War is vigorously opposed by Clinton Anderson, until recently the Secretary of Agriculture. 32 of the Senate's 96 seats are at stake. But in states like Illinois, untried Democratic contenders like Paul Douglas, a university professor, are given little chance against Republican veterans like Curly Brooks. At best, the Democrats hope for a 2-seat Senate majority. Election morning ends the presentation of the case. a presidential jury goes out for the 41st time since 1789. It is a jury chosen regardless of race, color, creed, or sex. In city and town, in fair weather and foul, an estimated 45 million voters, perhaps a record number, go to the polls to exercise their heritage, the right to choose their president. Even the weather seems to be against President Truman as he goes to vote in Independence, Missouri. But that can't shake his confidence any more than do the opinion polls, which rate him no chance. Here's one vote he's absolutely sure of. And two others quickly follow as his wife and daughter cast their ballots. The election weather in Independence is no worse than it is in Paducah, Kentucky, where Senator Alben Barkley, the Democratic vice presidential candidate, adds another sure vote to the Truman-Barr Club. Governor and Mrs. Dewey, like President Truman, beaming and full of apparently justified confidence, arrive early at their election district in New York City. The other half of the Republicans' ticket, vice presidential candidate Earl Warren, with his wife, votes across the nation in Oakland, California. In the South, Governor Strom Thurmond of South Carolina, who heads the Southern Democrat states' rights ticket, votes in Edgefield. Minor party candidates like Norman Thomas, heading the socialist ticket for the 6th straight time, vote without fanfare. No one thinks they'll win, but the votes they get are expected to hurt Truman. As the polls close across the nation, New York's Times Square is almost deserted. The result is considered a foregone conclusion. Then comes the first hint of an upset in the making. Truman takes an early lead. In Dewey headquarters, the Democratic lead causes no alarm. Traditionally, the first votes are from Democratic cities. When New York's 47 electoral votes appear safely Republican, Dewey's campaign manager, Herbert Brownell, makes a jubilant announcement.
We now know that Governor Dewey will carry New York State by at least 50,000 votes and that he will be the next president of the United States.
Democratic headquarters ignore Republican claims. Jim Farley and Howard McGrath, past and present party chiefs, watch Truman's surprising lead with cautious optimism. In Progressive Party headquarters, Henry Wallace hears the returns. His vote, while small, affects several states and delays any clear-cut presidential decision. But Senate victors become known. Mayor Humphrey wins, and Minnesota, considered safely Republican, soon goes to Truman. Estes Kefauver easily wins in Tennessee for the Democrats. As the Senate returns pour in, one state after another falls into the Democratic column. In New Mexico, Democrat Clinton Anderson joins the victors. The magnitude of the upset becomes clear, as in Illinois, isolationist Republican Curly Brooks is unseated by Paul Douglas, never given a chance. Meanwhile, at Dewey headquarters, the Republican candidate and his family join millions across the nation in listening to the astounding returns. It's now certain that even should Dewey win, he'd have a Democratic Senate. Also close to his radio is Senator Barkley. The reports now point to the undreamed possibility that the Democrats may win control of the House. As the early morning hours drag on, party workers wonder if this can be the election the experts meant when they predicted Dewey's victory would be certain before midnight. It's now almost dawn, and everyone's having trouble staying awake. With Dixiecrat Thurmond carrying 4 states, all that's certain yet is that the race is so close that maybe no candidate will have a majority. For the first time since 1824, the presidency may be decided by the House of Representatives. For the moment, there's nothing to do but wait. The outcome now hinges on 3 pivotal states, Illinois, California, and Ohio. The lead in each has changed several times during the evening. Now again it swings towards Truman. Dewey headquarters are thrown into deep gloom. The Democrats have captured the Senate and the supposedly impossible House. When the final break comes, it's from Ohio, the state called the mother of presidents. At 11:14 the next morning, with the outcome now certain, Thomas E. Dewey sends a message in keeping with the tradition of American democracy.
I've sent the following wire to President Truman. My heartiest congratulations to you on your election and every good wish for a successful administration. I urge all Americans to unite behind you in support of every effort to keep our nation strong and free and to establish peace in the world.
Democratic headquarters goes wild. It was a landslide, just as the experts predicted, only it was Democratic. In Missouri, friends and colleagues congratulate the man who engineered the most stunning political upset in U.S. history. And Americans of all political faiths join in saluting the man who didn't know when he was licked, and then proved he was right, President Harry S. Truman.
Returned to Washington. President Truman and Senator Barkley, who led the Democrats to their amazing election landslide, ride in triumph from the Capitol down the famous mile-and-a-half to the White House. A happy warrior returns the cheers of 750,000 Washingtonians, a turnout rivaling all others in Capitol history. This is the jubilant climax of the 30,000 grueling miles of campaigning, of the uphill battle against odds that were called impossible. Now, back at the White House, back at what will be his residence for 4 more years, President Truman says,
I shall look forward to help and cooperation of all the people, because we are faced with great issues now, which I think we can bring to a successful conclusion.
To advance the cause of peace at home and abroad, Vice President-elect Barkley urges,
Now that the election is over and the result has been decisively determined, I hope that all of our people may be united and move forward to the accomplishment of these ends. I thank you very much, Mr. President, and all this great crowd of people.
2 days later, the President flies to Key West, Florida. He is greeted by Captain Cecil Adele, Commandant of the Boca Chica Naval Submarine Base. Here, far from Washington rumors of administration shakeups and legislative programs to come, the President of the United States heads for a well-earned 2-week vacation.
Gaily bedecked Washington, jammed to overflowing, prepares for the Truman inaugural. In a hectic week celebrating his becoming president in his own right, Mr. Truman, really enjoying himself, tells Truman Barkley Club members,
I'm in a rather embarrassing position. Both my bosses are sitting here at this table. The only 2 people in the world that I ever called boss, I still call Barkley boss, and I've always had for the last, as long as I can remember. Senator Barkley and I have been going along with the Democratic Party ever since we can remember, and he's somewhat younger than I am. But I'll say this, that as long as I was a member of the United States Senate, when my leader in the United States Senate decided on a policy that the Democratic Party should pursue, I followed that leader in the pursuit of that policy, and I think that's a good plan. Incidentally, I'm putting out a little propaganda.
At the Electoral College dinner on the eve of his taking oath, Mr. Truman, for the first time, tells how he spent the night of America's most surprising election.
I had my sandwich and glass of buttermilk and went to bed at 6:30. And along about 12 o'clock, I happened to wake up for some reason, and the radio was turned on the National Broadcasting Company. And Mr. Kelton-Bourne was saying, while the president is 1,000,000 votes ahead in the popular vote, we have yet to hear from the people. And we are very sure that when the country vote comes in, Mr. Truman will be defeated by an overwhelming majority. And I went back to bed and went to sleep. At about 4 o'clock in the morning, the chief of the Secret Service came in and said, Mr. President, I think you better get up and listen to the broadcast. We've been listening all night. And I said, all right. And I turned the darn thing on, and there was Mr. Kelton born again. And then Mr. Harkness came on and analyzed the situation. I called the Secret Service men, and I said, we better go back to Kansas City. It looks as if I'm elected. Along about 10 o'clock, I got a telegram which said that the election was over and that I should be congratulated on the fact that I had won the election. And apparently it was too bad, but it happened.
Later that night, at the National Guard Auditorium, the President and his family are honored at a giant inaugural gala. The Whistle Stop Express, a reminder of the President's grueling campaign tours, brings in some of the 700 Hollywood stars who present the entertainment world salute to the Trumans, one of the biggest shows in history.
Inauguration morning. This is the day Harry Truman was supposed to be going back to Missouri. Instead, 130,000 see him, accompanied by Vice President-elect Barclay, enter Capitol Plaza for the 40th presidential inauguration since George Washington's 160 years ago. The president comes to the historic spot where presidents before him, here Woodrow Wilson, have stood and taken their oaths in exactly this position. A month after Wilson was inaugurated, America was forced into World War I. Here, Calvin Coolidge, in an era of fabulous prosperity, was sworn in to succeed himself. Here in March 1929, at the peak of the prosperity, which 7 months later came crashing down into the Depression, Herbert Hoover was inaugurated. 4 years later, Franklin D. Roosevelt began the unprecedented four-term administration, which was to make him known and loved throughout the world. This was March 4th, 1933. 12 years and 1 month later, on the eve of victory, Franklin Roosevelt died. Humble and heartbroken, Harry Truman, with tears in his eyes, repeated the presidential oath after Chief Justice Stone at a simple ceremony in the White House. The same Bible, open to "Blessed are the peacemakers," is again under his hand, now on Inauguration Day, 1949.
So help you God. So help me God. Coming year, our program for peace and freedom will emphasize 4 major courses of action. First, we will continue to give unfaltering support to the United Nations and related agencies, and we will continue to search for ways to strengthen their authority and increase their effectiveness. We believe that the United Nations will be strengthened by the new nations which are being formed in lands now advancing towards self-government under democratic principles. Second, we will continue our programs for world economic recovery. Third, we will strengthen freedom-loving nations against the dangers of aggression. We are working out with a number of countries a joint agreement designed to strengthen the security of the North Atlantic area. Such an agreement would take the form of a collective defense arrangement within the terms of the United Nations Charter. The primary purpose of these agreements is to provide unmistakable proof of the joint determination of the free countries to resist armed attack from any quarter. Every country participating in these arrangements must contribute all it can to the common defense. We make it sufficiently clear in advance that any armed attack affecting our national security would be met with overwhelming force, the armed attack might never occur. Fourth, we must embark on a bold new program for making the benefits of our scientific advances and industrial progress available for the improvement and growth of underdeveloped areas.
In his inaugural address, the President asks America to lead the way to a better world. He condemns communism as a false philosophy and calls for greater liberty around the world. Then, with Vice President Barclay, he leads the most spectacular inaugural parade in Capitol history down Constitution Avenue. Around his car march his artillery buddies of Battery D. Over 1.25 million spectators jam every inch of the parade route. The Air Force salutes its Commander-in-Chief with a 650 plane review, the greatest aerial parade ever staged over the Capitol. 40,000, including all the nation's services, march in the parade, which stretches for 7 miles and takes over 3 hours to pass the reviewing stand opposite the White House. Men and women throughout the democratic world join in saluting Harry S. Truman and Alvin W. Barclay, the President and Vice President of the United States.